Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, Ajoy. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing great, John. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I think I know why you're doing great. I know the Eastern Conference NBA standings currently, and who's the number one?
Yeah, that's one good reason. The Celtics are doing really good, and hope to see them going really far. The other good reason is I'm reading this great book written by John Flynn, and it's a fascinating book. My wife wants to read it next, and I'm really excited about it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you, and I appreciate your support. And it was yes. So I have released a book, my first ever. Hopefully, it's not glaringly obvious that it's a first-time novel coming out of it. But I do thank you for your support, and I'm also super, super excited today because we've had a lot of cool guests on here. But I think we're getting to the close of the pinnacle here, right? Why don't you introduce our guest for today, Joy? I'm so pumped for this one.
Yeah, drum roll here because this guest, Ryan Jones, a fabulous person. He a great mentor. He's our Microsoft Northeast Architecture, Engineering, Construction GM. Ryan, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you,
So
gentlemen.
Ryan,
Long-time listener, first-time guest. It's a pleasure to be here.
awesome.
Awesome.
So Ryan, let's jump into it. You lead the AEC real estate group for Microsoft in the Northeast. It's not a small feat. Could you share with us some pivotal moments in your career, your key experiences that has led you to this point in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in Microsoft just under 8 years after maybe 15 at Verizon. And at Verizon is really where I first started to get into industry sales. And the industries that I was assigned to in one of those stints was construction, transportation, and distribution. And three fascinating industries with three very different set of priorities. But the construction one really appealed to me. Joy, you know this. I don't know if John's aware, but my grandfather started a construction company in DC in the 1950s, James C. Jones Builders Incorporated. They built a lot of churches, a lot of Catholic churches. They built a lot of wings to hospitals in the DC area. And it was a business that was created with the intention of it being a family run shop. And so now my father went into professional basketball and, kind of went away from that path, right? Went down a different path, played pro ball for a few years, came back into the DC area in the late 70s, took over the company. And so as I was born, as I was a child, I was on these sites. I was seeing all of the people that would come to these sites to put together these massive buildings, right? Massive to me as a child, still very large buildings that still stand to this day. And there was something about the impact of creating something and created a building that was going to be used for health reasons, or that was going to house multiple families, or was that going to be a place of worship? There was just something super cool, superhero-like in that to me. And so at Verizon, now I'm in my mid-20s, and I'm using technology now. I'm talking to companies about how they're using technology. At the time, wireless technology and different ways to make job sites safer, more efficient. But we were just kind of scratching the surface. I had a few stints where I called on the federal government, and then I got to see how Department of Defense approached construction, how Health and Human Services approached construction. It was just kind of this central theme of always going back to this industry that I had known as a child. A few years into my Microsoft career, I was in a leadership role, and I had an opportunity to take on one of the industry teams. And my career is really centered around three different industries. I spent a lot of time with defense contractors. I spent a lot of time in the media and entertainment industries, and I spent a lot of time with construction customers. And I saw this opportunity to be at kind of the ground floor of a lot of cloud innovation and AI innovation within construction. As I look at it, it's an industry that the world needs. That is the answer to famines, to wars, to aging infrastructure, to depressions, to pandemics, to putting people back to work. It's the one industry that throughout the country, no matter if it's an emerging nation, if it's a third world country, if you are top of the line civilization, there's a need for construction. There's always going to be a need for construction, and there's a need for change in construction. And so that's what's led me into this role now, where I've got the pleasure of working alongside with you and several other individuals, and really trying to learn the voice of the industry, and then how can we influence the evolution of products and technologies within Microsoft to support that industry.
I love that, Ryan. That's amazing, and I didn't know that story, so that's super cool. I didn't know. So, I mean, how perfect is it, right? You've seen the industry, you've grown up in it, quite literally and figuratively, right? And now you're servicing it from a technology standpoint. So, I think if I look at it, I mean, super unique position for you to see how technology has aided construction and how construction has followed and also influenced technology as they've grown up in lockstep with each other. Where do you see in today's world where some of those challenges exist between the industry and then the technology that serves it, and then the industry that infers back on how technology needs to evolve itself to best serve the industry of AEC? How do you see what are some of those pivotal challenges that you see today?
Well, if I look at just the C part of AEC for the construction customers, I think the biggest challenge that you have there is you have a very large ecosystem of niche solutions, and there really isn't a standard, if you will, of technology that all these solutions can kind of plug into. There's no common data model. There are varying degrees of data estates that are within the industry. And as we look at AI, and everyone's interested in AI, they want to look at how do I put AI to work. Your AI is only going to be as good as your data. In many cases, your data requires some intense, tender loving care to make sure that it's in a state where it could be used for something. And quite candidly, construction firms don't have the they don't have the margin flexibility to really invest a ton of time into that right now. If there's a solution that they're going to put into their ecosystem, it better be the right solution, and it better garner results immediately, because those margins are super thin. And even as we see construction spending going up, a lot of that spending is due to inflation. You look at the cost of material prices are increasing. You look at a shortage of skilled labor, not just in the US, but globally. I do think that it's interesting that there seems to be more of a focus on sustainability in the global market than what we see in the US. But again, it's finding the right solution that is going to deliver almost an immediate ROI, because they don't have time to waste. There are some brilliant minds at many of the construction firms that we deal with that have visions and dreams of innovating. But the reality is that they're running a business where their margins aren't going to be very forgiving if they make a decision and the ROI is 9 months versus 3 months out, right? I mean, that could be a number of jobs, that could be a number of projects that are stalled. That's investment in other parts of the business. And so there's this demand for technology, but there's a demand for technology that almost has to hit the head of the nail perfectly in order to really take off. And I think that's a unique challenge that Microsoft is well positioned to do. Microsoft is a platform. And with every industry that we support, it's a platform where we say, hey, bring us your ideas, bring us your wish list, and build on this platform, and use this platform that can stretch from your office workers to your knowledge workers to your field and site workers to your contractors, but it's all the same platform. So it's a matter of taking a lot of these niche solutions, either finding ways to connect them to the platform, or in instances where maybe it's time for an evolution of that niche service. How do we now take our platform and either customize that for industry, or create a scenario that works for industry, where now those field workers are using a program, and the data from that program is going back to the foreman's office, who's able to look at productivity, and that data is going back in the same format now to the executives, who can look at productivity, who can look at supply chain for that site in comparison to any other sites they may have going in the region, in the world. It's very exciting. There's a lot of logistics to this, right? And so I think that some of the work that we did with Department of Defense, it leans in here, right? When you look at supply chain and how do I get a crane from the middle of the Saudi Arabian desert over to California and do it efficiently, and make sure that by the time that equipment gets there, that I've got the workers on site to do the work, because after it's done there, it's got to go somewhere else in the country. And so the logistics, the supply chain, I just think that there's tons of opportunities for ways for technology to kind of improve the industry. And it's up to us and it's up to our customers to challenge us, to tell us what they need, and quite candidly, to hold our feet to the fire to make sure that we get it right for them.
Wow, that is so much unpacked in there. I mean, you've hit on so many topics over there, but at the core of it, what I'm hearing is efficiency, 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 right? Construction margins are razor thin, uh, interest rates are high, the cost of construction is coming to a point where it doesn't make sense sometimes to
Right.
construct something because it's just so expensive. So, how do you see, and you touched a little bit on AI, but I want to go a little bit deeper into the AI conversation. How do you see AI really creating that efficiency? You talked about, the platform, the ecosystem, and having been a customer myself in the past, having run IT in the past, I believe in that, right? That's why one of the reasons I came to Microsoft, because I saw that, you can, there's efficiency created in creating in working with a platform as opposed to going after niche solutions, right? But can you give us your thoughts on how you see AI kind of being that connective tissue and Microsoft being the connective tissue across all digital assets?
I think that I love what our marketing team did with calling it Copilot. I didn't love it at first. But the more that you think of it, AI is a tool, right? If you think about that worker on that construction site and his toolbox or his tool belt or whatever he's going into work with, AI is a tool on that belt, the same as the hammer or the Phillips head screwdriver or the drill bit. It's a tool in that belt to be used. Um, I think there are various ways that AI can assist. I think that a lot of the firms that we engage with right now are not only looking for use cases that will get them quick wins, but there's a change management element to it in terms of how you use it, how you deploy it, how you get it out. When you look at some of the labor shortage that you see in the industry right now, I think AI can help with some of the automation of repetitive tasks, like data entry, like design iteration. I think that AI can help from a cost reduction and an efficiency perspective in terms of predictive maintenance and risk maintenance. And we've already seen this to a degree with some of our other industries. Manufacturing comes to mind. I mean, again, I mentioned I'd spent some time in the defense and aerospace. There's all kinds of predictive technology that's put out to gauge the life cycle of a particular tool. When is something going to go bad? When do we need to replace it? When do we need to update it? I think there's little ways like that that AI can help with the efficiency and really the productivity, right? I think productivity is really the biggest problem in the industry right now. Is how do you manage that productivity and how do you manage it in as close to real time as possible? When I was at Verizon, that's what it was about. It was about transmitting over that wireless network so that the information was getting to the decision makers as quickly as possible. As we see 5G taking over, as we see cloud computing taking over, and ways for people to collaborate virtually across the world, the speed with which they're able to get the data of what's happening on site and what needs to happen on site will then allow AI to assist with predictive maintenance, with decision making, with supply chain logistics. Again, as I mentioned, and Joy, you know this, we run the business here in the US. We do a lot of partnering with our peers over in Europe and Asia and Latin America. Some of the trending that they've got leans towards more sustainability. And in a lot of cases, it's because the rules and the restrictions and the regulations are either defined by a geographical area or they're defined by the actual country. Whereas here in the US, we have different regulations per state. It's kind of difficult to really make a big bet when you have so many different nuances depending on which part of the country that you're in. I feel like 2 years ago, sustainability was huge. It was all anyone talked about in construction. I feel like it's died out a little bit as a lot of firms are waiting for the federal government to kind of standardize something that they can go to. But globally, I see AI being used in sustainable construction by optimizing energy usage, material selection, waste reduction, things of that nature. And then I think the biggest thing that I see a lot of people looking at right now is safety enhancements, right? I mean, the safety of the workers, right? These are the men and the women that are creating the infrastructure upon which our kids are going to go to school. They're going to drive. Our grandkids are going to play in these parks and attend these universities. How do we make sure that the men and the women that are building these infrastructure, how are we keeping them safe? right? How are we creating safe infrastructure? I'm right outside of the Baltimore area, right? And the world was shocked the Key Bridge fall just today, right? But this is a problem that we know that we have in the US. So how are we creating and building structures that can stand the test of time, that can stand, increasing weather conditions? The pyramids have stood for thousands of years, right? How do we adapt some of that ancient technology and make sure that the buildings that we're creating can also stand for thousands of years, but allow for room for optimization? I think quality control, I think there's some best practices from our manufacturing industry that can apply here in terms of quality control, eliminating defects, and kind of establishing that control baseline of your product.
Yeah, for sure. I want to double click on something you said, Brian, and not only global. I'm going to narrow it down to the North American market, or the US market, if you would, around regulations. How each state has a different regulation, and there's so many things that go into. It's not just bricks, mortar, coverings, paint. Here you go. Here's a building. There's so much pre, during, and post work there. How does Microsoft, as a platform organization that does rely on partners as well to bring their offerings to bear to help this industry, how do we plan for providing a solution that is not a one size fits all, but something that everyone can consume, even though they have different regulatory requirements across each and every state? How do we as an organization manage that or navigate that?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to identify who the target is for it. I recall bringing up sustainability to one of our top 10 construction firms in the world that's based here in the US. And we talked about sustainability and the opportunity for sustainability and where we saw an opportunity for this company to deploy it. And the C-suite executive pulled me aside very politely and said, "We're building the infrastructure and then we're leaving. That's more a concern for the actual owner, the operator. So while we appreciate it, until we can find a way to work that into our cost basis and then pass those costs on, it doesn't necessarily fit for the scope of what they do." Now, again, I think it depends on what type of company you're talking to. My team is split. So I'd say 70% of my team calls on construction. The other 30% of my team calls on real estate customers that actually own some of these buildings. And that's a completely different talk track. That's a completely different set of priorities. They have an interest in the sustainability story because that is now an offering that they can provide for their clients. It goes into their operational costs of how they run the business, how they own and maintain that building. But my other clients who may have built the organization, unless there's a way for them to kind of pass that cost on to whoever's buying, it doesn't make as much sense to them. Now, there is a concern they have in terms of how they're operating, right? And so as they're building, how are they employing sustainability practices while building? But again, I think that one of the things that we and other sustainability providers have to really focus on is who are we giving the message to and making sure it's the right group of people that are going to care about it. We do some amazing things. And I think that you have seen some of the newer construction that's incorporating green designs, and green designs, not necessarily just for sustainability practices, but also for the quality of the life of the people who are inhabiting that. I think of some of our more recent structures, like our campus in Atlanta, for example, with beehives and honey on the 16th floor, right? And outdoor gardens. And it's beautiful to look at. It's a beautiful setting to enjoy, but you're also helping the environment of the local city and the neighborhood, right? Now, the builders aren't always going to care about that. It's an added cost. And again, we're talking about an industry where margins are already razor thin. So I think that there's a balance that needs to be obtained. But if you have either a public-private partnership with the companies that are building these infrastructure and cities and counties they're building them in, and there's a way to not only share the cost, but also to either pass that cost along or to advertise how this is helping that overall long-term relationship, well, then you're on to something. I don't know that there's a one-size-fits-all for sustainability just yet. Again, with some of the actual owners of the buildings, there's a different priority for them where it makes sense. They want to invest in it and they're willing to take on the ongoing cost of ownership. But for the builders, until those margins grow, I don't know that you're going to see widespread adoption of that in their building practices.
And
I'd be
Ryan,
glad to be wrong. Be very glad to be wrong on that.
no, I think you're onto something, but I also think, because there are federal guidelines coming down. I know that's in
Yeah.
the works. We're hearing about it, so I think you're going to see a change in the sustainability part of construction, especially in scope one, which is what they can
Yeah.
directly impact, as opposed to scope two and three, where it's more impacting your partners and things like that. So I think there's a lot more coming down the pipe, and I think you're onto something. I do want to ask you something about, so you earlier you mentioned, what's the vision for Microsoft? You kind of laid that out. Can you just shed some light on how you see kind of the what? How do you realize the vision? Like, what are some of the things that Microsoft, in your opinion, is doing to realize that vision?
Well, I think that I think we're listening to industry in a way that we haven't done before, and we're doing it in a number of industries. And you and I have placed a bet on construction, because I think we see the total addressable market and we see the need for innovation within this industry. But I think what you're seeing Microsoft bringing people in from industry, much as we brought you in, Joy. And I recall some of the early conversations. Around, hey, well, I don't want to step on people's toes. I'm just kind of here to observe. Like, no, we're bringing you in and tell us what's wrong about how we go to market. Tell us what's wrong about the product and why it doesn't work. I think that there's a huge need in the ERP space for
Right.
a tool that is, if it's not built for construction, it's easily customizable for construction. I think that's where this thing needs to go. And then I think that you take your Procores, your AutoCADs, your Trembles, you name the niche solution, the construction provider, and then have a connector where that's now connecting into that ERP and creating that common data model that now you can put some governance around, and you can set AI in motion,
Completely agree.
and you can get
Completely
some of those
agree.
predictive measures. You can get those supply chain logistics, everything speaking to each other.
Yeah.
That's my vision for where this thing needs to go. Now, again, internally, we're fighting for mind share. We're fighting for R&D dollars with the healthcare, the retail, the manufacturing, the financial services, the energy industries of the world, who are all doing massively important things in their spaces. But that's the common theme. It's connecting all of that data on one platform that can support everyone. I don't see another software provider that has that. I don't.
Agreed. And your
I
point earlier,
looked, right. I've looked at our competitors. I looked at some of our partners. There is no other platform that is ubiquitous enough in nature to be accessible and applicable to every part of the life cycle. But you have to have something to connect everything to. It can't be old Microsoft. You can't go out and buy everyone and acquire everyone. You have to collaborate with
yeah,
everyone. I think that the growth mindset, the open mindset that Satya has brought to our company over the last few years, it absolutely applies here. You look at some of the recent partnerships that we've developed. Who would have ever thought Microsoft and Oracle would develop a partnership, right? But it's there. You look
yeah,
at some of the partnerships that we've announced with Procore within the last few months here around Copilot. I think you're going to see more of that. I think you're going to see more of some of the key players in industry incorporating our technology into theirs. And I think that we need to open up the doors and allow for connectors for their technology to latch onto ours, and then to allow that common data model to be created. And then again, we got a lot of heavy lifting, because just connecting them isn't enough. You've got to put the data governance in sight. You've got to shore up the cybersecurity of it as we look at new threats that come from abroad with nation state actors, and the opportunity that people have to kind of get into networks, and the risks that are posed now when everything is connected to each other. So it is a Herculean task, but it's one that we have to do. I don't see a way that we have construction in the future that doesn't have everything connected in this fashion.
completely
So it's a
agree.
long
Completely.
Yeah.
drawn out answer to your question, but I think it's listening to industry, it's taking that feedback, it's working with industry. It requires the technology partner, it requires the construction partners, it's going to require a consortium of GCs and thought leaders within the industry to say, hey, this is the way that this thing needs to go. Because that's the other piece to it. It's got to be standardized, right? You can introduce a tool,
That is
but
key.
if only 3% of the industry is using it, you've wasted a lot of money, right? Like, it's got to work for everyone, and it has to be easily customizable enough that niche companies or needs can be created with a fairly easy level of difficulty.
I mean, look, your passion comes through the screen in absolute leaps and bounds, right? And I love working with you guys. And I'm going to dress better next time I see you guys. But I love working with you guys for the fact that you do share that common. We are here. Microsoft is changing this industry to help the industry versus Microsoft is entering into this industry because it's going to be good for us, right? We look at the sustainability goals, not only that we publish as a company, but that we play forward into the products and solutions and partnerships that we put out there. You talk about Satya and his vision, his very inclusive vision. It's not Microsoft versus the world anymore. It's Microsoft with the world, helping the world. And I love all of that. But so Ryan gets up in the morning, it's another day, here we go. And it's a journey and it's hard and it's difficult, all the things that you mentioned, right? What keeps that one foot in front of the other? What keeps you running on that journey to make sure that we are the company that delivers what the construction industry needs, what the architectural industry, what the engineering businesses need? What keeps you going like, this is another day that we're going to crush it?
I think it's the opportunity to put something in place that'll be there when I'm done with this role, right? And when I'm driving grandkids around, to be able to look at something and say, like, hey, I had a part in driving that forward. As I mentioned, the industry has to move forward. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And it can't just be one company. It has to be the entire industry as a whole, kind of moving forward to really evolve this thing to where we need it to be. I can still drive around DC. I can go to 6th and 8th Street Northwest. I can go to Piney Branch Road Northwest, and I can see buildings that my father worked with his company to create in the 80s that are still there, that are still providing services, that are still supporting the community. And there's a pride in that. I can look at programs that I put in place, like the Associated Builders and Contractors program with Verizon, that's maybe 12 or 13 years old at this point, that I put together over there and was able to support more than 20,000 of their suppliers and contractors. Wow. And to see that still in place, and people still getting value out of that, and now getting the opportunity to work with ABC in a different format where we're sending a Joy down to talk about AI and kind of what's coming in the industry. And if we want to get Hollywood and romantic about it, I think there's some unfinished business between my family and the industry. The interest rates of the 80s destroyed a lot of family operations, and my family's construction shop was no different, right? And so James C. Jones Builders shuttered its doors after almost 47 years of operating in the DC area, largely due to the interest rates of the late 80s that just kind of made it an untenable scenario, unless you had the right joint ventures or the right partnerships, or you were doing business with certain maybe government entities, right, where the money was still coming in. This is another shot. This is another shot for my bloodline to innovate, to contribute, to add to the industry. So that gets me excited about it. Learning new things that I didn't know about this industry get me excited about it. But I think it's the opportunity to kind of leave a legacy and say, like, hey, I had a part in that. I don't need my name in lights. I just need to know that I had a part in it, and that it's driving forward because of the impact that I was able to contribite to.
I love that.
And Ryan, as a leader of a team in the past, in my past life, and what you've done, it reminds me of the statement: "We don't build buildings, we build people." Right?
Yes.
Yes. Right. And that's kind of what I'm getting out of what you just said. It's beautiful. And it's really true, because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about: is how do we build a better place than what we started off with.
Yeah.
I love it. This is awesome. Ryan, thank you so much. We've learned a lot. I think this is great. We'll definitely, we're going to have you back on here, and we're going to talk more about construction, Microsoft, what we're doing, what Microsoft ourselves are doing. But this was a great session. Thank you so much for your time.
Gentlemen, thank you for having me. Again, I've loved every guest that you had on. It's an honor to be on here today to contribute And I would ask the industry people that are listening, challenge us, tell us what you need from us. I know the customers that my team supports are challenging us and they're letting us know what they need. But if you're in the South, if you're in the West, if you're in another part of the world, reach out to your Microsoft account team, reference this interview, reference these discussions. We have a community that we have created within Microsoft where we're making our own industry team and we're partnering together, we're sharing best practices. But we need your voices, we need your expertise to tell us which way you need us to shape this technology for you all. So again, gentlemen, thank you both for having me on today. I'm looking forward to listening to this one in future sessions.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much. And everyone, the QR code is up for you to click on and subscribe. Mr. Jones or Dr. Jones, thank you so much for being here and being a guest for us today. And take that challenge, everyone listening, right? We are only here to serve you, right? We don't make things up and think they're cool and then you use them. We use what you need and we work in partnership with you. And then Microsoft teams throughout the globe to do exactly that, to partner with you, to listen to you, and then help you action where you see value. Joy, it's been an absolute pleasure as always. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and we will see you very, very soon on the next episode of Blueprints and Bytes. Take care, everyone.